Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What with Dan and Julie. Today we've got Dean on, who is a paleontologist. Hi, Dean.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very, very good. Very good.
Good stuff. Let's jump straight in then. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do, Dean?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm a paleontologist, as you say, which I pretty much get the chance to live out my childhood dream of genuinely digging up dinosaurs and studying fossils. It literally is a childhood dream come true for me. It's something I've been wanting to do since I was a little kid, and yeah, I get to do that now. I've been doing that professionally for over a decade. So I think it's come up to 13 years. I'm getting old. Yeah, coming up to 13 years now thinking about it. And as part of that job, there's a lot more than just digging up dinosaurs, of course, but we'll get into that, I'm sure.
So where did this passion come from then? You mentioned, you've always loved dinosaurs from very young age, but where did it come from, do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I was one of those kids. The type of kid who's that annoying child telling you dinosaur facts and figures. And, and that was me, and I still do that. I get to do that now as part of my job. So all that time as a child came real. All that time as a child gaining experience, reading about dinosaurs and talking about them all came in very handy. But it ultimately comes from since as far back as I can remember, genuinely. I've been fascinated by all things dinosaur, fossil related, anything natural history or to do with animals. I've always had animals growing up. I've always had pets and things, and I couldn't actually say, I couldn't put my finger on it and say, yep, this is the moment I like dinosaurs and like paleontology. It just seems like it's always been there. And from my family side of things, there was nobody in my family who ever had an interest in paleontology. So it genuinely just come from within it. It may well have been as simple as playing with toy dinosaurs that that captured my interest. But as a kid, I used to watch a lot of the movies and things and TV shows, and obviously you can mention, I can imagine I'd mentioned Jurassic Park, but when that came out, which was 93, I was only 3 or 4 years old, so I don't recall watching that until I was a little bit older, but I do remember watching the Land Before Time series. Do either of you remember that?
Yes, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's a special film, especially the first one was quite something.
Yeah, I remember one of them was quite sad.
I remember that VCR.
Yeah. I remember there's a very sad moment in that. It's a bit like the Bambi scene, obviously at the beginning of the film where Bambi's mother gets shot and dies, which is dreadful. But it's
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert there. I should shut up. I'll not say too much what happens in Land Before Time, but something similar. And I guess for growing up, it's one of those things. It's a way of children kind of dealing with their emotions and learning about loss and things. But it's in the scheme of things with Land Before Time, I used to really love that. Love that film and the whole series that came off the back of it. And maybe from watching those movies, from playing with dinosaur toys and stuff like that. Maybe that's where it really came from. And of course, reading books and things like that.
How did you sort of carry it on though? Because obviously, I think we all go through probably a dinosaur phase, but you stayed in it. What did you do going through, secondary school and then going into your higher education? What did you do to further your interest in this field?
Yeah, it's funny you say about we all go through a dinosaur phase. I guess for me, I just never grew up, right? No,
it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. That's for sure. It's it was interesting going through school. So as I got older, I guess my mum especially, but my parents, my family all kind of figured it'd be just a phase that everybody goes through. And as I got to my teen years, perhaps it'll just disappear. I become interested in other things and that. But it just continued to get stronger. And as I got to, I should say I had sort of owned fossils and collected fossils since probably about the age of maybe 6 or 7. I still remember collecting one fossil when I think I was 9 years old as part of a school trip to Castleton. I still got that fossil as well. It was a fossilized coral that was about 350 million years old, which is, it was neat. But no, I as I continued going through school, collected more fossils, started to buy fossils to learn from, because I found that was really important, especially as I got to my teen years, where it was very clear that it was still something I really wanted to do as a profession. But of course, the problem became, as you can imagine, with something like paleontology, it's such a niche and very unusual field. And a lot of people still ask me, oh, is that a real job? I still get that. And we always laugh. Other colleagues of mine get that too. And yeah, so going through school, going through sort of primary school, especially, you know, that fascination has continued. Got to secondary school, and it was absolutely still there. Continued to collect fossils, buy fossils to learn from, and that. And as it got to my kind of GCSEs, I guess, so what's that age, sort of 15, 16, I was still, you know, massively into paleontology. That's all I was kind of sleeping, eating, everything was paleontology. And in school, academically, you might be surprised to learn I was really poor academically. I wasn't very good. I was more of a kind of CD student at best.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, and with my GCSEs, I just about scraped by. I actually failed science, would you believe?
No way.
Yeah. So I got I got 2 Ds in science, and so obviously that's a fail, you know, going higher and whatnot, you know, looking at grades to go and get and do A levels here in the UK, and I so for having the 2 Ds, I actually wasn't allowed to do A level biology, which is a degree that I would have needed for university. And
A level
so, yeah.
biology is super hard as well. It's so hard.
Did you do that then?
Yes, but I don't have actually. I think I probably got a D or something. It's a ridiculous subject.
No, I can imagine. I imagine, you know, because of my poor grades at GCSE, and plus I didn't pass math either. So I just about scraped by. I remember GCSEs, my best grade, I think, was a B in geography, and even that I was surprised myself. And anyway, so when it got to sort of A levels, I wasn't able to do biology, and you know, looking forward and looking at the potential of a career in paleontology. And from speaking to museum professionals and people who are in the profession itself, you know, when I'm thinking sort of 16, 17, they're all saying, oh, you know, Dean, for university, you're going to need 3 A's or sort of A, B, B at the very, very least to be able to get accepted onto a university course to study paleontology or a similar discipline as an undergrad. And so I'm already thinking, yeah, this is going to be way, 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 way too hard for me to achieve, you know, considering I wasn't even allowed to do A-level biology. And so I also, I should point out as well, I didn't have the finances to go to university either. So I come from quite a, you know, probably the best way of putting it is a working class family background, you know, where my family had really struggled each month to sort of find enough money to pay for bills and things. So we weren't in a financial position to go to university anyway with my, you know, the lack of qualifications and A levels and stuff, but also from the financial side of things. And so with my career, it was a little bit different. So throughout the entire time in school, that passion was constantly there. But when it came to A levels, I couldn't do any science. I ended up failing both A levels that I did take, which was, I remember, it was English and technology. I think technology I got an E, and technology I think it was an E, or I scraped a D. And so obviously I didn't have anything here. I couldn't go to uni, and so I had to think outside the box a little bit. And luckily I spoke to this is very random, spoke to a supply teacher who was kind of brought in to help sixth form students to kind of reach their goals and things. And he, I explained what I want to do. His first reaction was, what the hell's a paleontologist? And then we had a good long conversation. And I said, look, I've been thinking about experience, volunteering and things like that to kind of open up my professional experience. And bearing in mind, obviously at this point I'm 18 years old, but anyway, long story short, with that, he managed to get in contact with a museum in America and set something up.
Wow. Well, what happened there then? What? That's pretty cool. When you just speak to a teacher, he's like, yeah, I've got contacts in the US and you can go on a dig or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like that, you know. This chap, the teacher, I still keep in touch with him. He's such a great guy. His name was Renato Bonacorsi. So he was of an Italian sort of descent.
What a name.
Yeah, it's such a great name. Yeah. He always teases me now over the years. He's saying, Dean, you need to name a dinosaur after me as Bonacorsisaurus. I was like, that'll be a mouthful. But he got on the phone. This was, so going back to, this is literally like the last month of sixth form in 2008. And he got on the phone to the Natural History Museum and a bunch of universities around the UK and basically kept saying, look, I've got this lad here who really is passionate about paleontology, but he doesn't have the grades, doesn't have the finances, etc., to go to uni. And he got the same kind of response that I was getting, you know, a few years before when I was 15, 16, 17, that, you know, you really have to have these grades, you must go to uni, etc. So between us, we kind of come up with this idea of, what about again this sort of first-hand proper experience, as it were, in America? Because I'd been traveling around the UK. My mum would take me to places around the UK to go fossil hunting, to go on kind of gain experience here in the UK, but it wasn't quite the experience that I really needed. And so I kind of put together this list of places, kind of dream places to visit in the US that I'd found literally by surfing the internet. And Renato got in touch with a few of them for me on behalf of me. I put together a kind of personal statement, why I wanted to achieve and why I wanted to do this. And I still have that, and which is funny to look back on. But he got in touch with this one museum called the Wyoming Dinosaur Center. I kind of figure you can't get anything more dinosaur than that, right? And he got in touch with them, and he spoke to a chap called Jeff McCoy, and he rang this guy called Jeff, and Jeff was literally on horseback out in Wyoming. It's very like
that's
stereotypical, isn't it? Yeah, right, exactly. And very American, like Midwest. And he got in touch with, he spoke with Renato, and Renato explained, I've got this lad here who's finishing high school. He wants to gain some first-hand experience. Could he come do some stuff with you out in America? So we had to go through a few things. We had to have a few conversations. And in short, they basically said we'd be willing to host Dean here for up to nearly 4 months. So it's a good chunk of time, but I'd have to pay for my own flights, of course, and pay for subsistence costs. They'd be willing to put me up in a house that they had. It was basically what they had for interns and students there for the summer. And so I said, absolutely, let's do this. So I had to raise up enough money to go out there, and genuinely what we ended up doing, Renato, bless him, he was in his spare time, he was actually like a singer, a part-time singer. So he did a mini concert for me at the school, and he raised a couple of £100, bless him.
Oh wow. And what a lovely guy.
Yeah, honestly, such a great guy. And on top of that, what I ended up doing, I was working a few jobs that I really, really didn't like. So I was working on the bar, it's sort of like just general sort of serving the public. I was working at Doncaster Racecourse on the bar there as well. And I was working delivery too. So just trying to get as much money as I could, because I saw the bigger picture. And on top of that, I ended up selling my childhood collection of Star Wars figures.
Oh no!
Yeah, super geeky that, right? But I ended up selling Star Wars.
Have you got them back yet?
Oh no, I haven't. No, I did keep a couple of them, to be fair. Although I should say, one of my former students and really now good friends of mine, she did, bless her, she bought one for me a few years ago. Yeah, I was like, that's very kind of you. That's really nice. And yeah, so sold my Star Wars collection, a bunch of other things as well, other possessions and that, and managed to raise up enough money to pay for the flights out to Wyoming in America. And this was I should paint the picture for this. It was literally the first time away from family. And you imagine, I guess at 18, being put on a sort of plane, I think I flew out of London, and I had altogether traveling was 24 hours. Wow. And I was knackered by the end of it. I had to take 3 or 4 flights, including one of these tiny little jumbo jet type things out into middle of nowhere. And it
2 rows of seats.
It was literally that. Yeah, literally that. And just this sounds really odd. It probably feels like I'm kind of rambling here, but it makes sense, this, because you'll be like, what? After all that 24 hours of traveling, right? I get there and it was say 7 p.m. at night. And the guy who was meant to be meeting me, Jeff McCoy, didn't turn up, right? So he was late. So he was meant to be there at 7. So I'm thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Middle of nowhere, I'm out here for 4 months, what's going on? And anyway, this other guy turns up. Greg, his name is, and we became great friends. And Greg's like, Eugene? I'm like, yeah. He's like, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I thought Jeff was meeting me. He's like, no, Jeff quit today.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I'm already thinking like, hang on a minute. So this is really kind of sets the scene. And we're driving back, and me and Greg kind of hit it off straight. I'm really tired, and it's getting to that point where it's like it's dusk, it's getting dark and that. And I says to Greg, I've just making conversation about stuff, and we're driving. It's about 20 minutes drive from the little airport there, and going to the museum. And I said to Greg, I've noticed a lot of deer like on the side of the road, like here. We don't really see that many deer out back in the UK where I'm from, and just weird conversation. I said, have you ever hit any of the deer? And he's like, I've clipped a few over 35 years. No word of a lie. We talked about Bambi at the beginning. Mm-hmm. No word of a lie. Within 30 seconds, we boom straight through a baby deer. Yeah, no word of a lie. And I mean, it's like you see in these. You see these videos are terrible where people hit deers. We were doing 70 miles per hour. There's nothing left of this baby deer, and genuinely this is no word of a lie. Greg turned to him and he's like, Dean, welcome to America. and I said, not even
That's your
thinking
lunch.
it. Yeah, that's your lunch. And I said it, not even thinking it. My response was, oh dear. It seems like a very British thing, but no, that kind of then set the tone then for the summer. But it was that then opened up anyway. So getting into that point here, so working with this museum, the Wyoming Dinosaur Center, I think it's important to kind of set the scene there with it.
Yeah.
But it then became the real springboard and laid the foundations for my career, because it was just absolutely incredible. So you imagine, for somebody who's been wanting to be a paleontologist since I can remember, who wanted to genuinely be digging up dinosaurs and living the life of the paleontologist, this museum, the Wyoming Dinosaur Center, offers everything. It genuinely has sort of 15, 20 dig sites within 10 minutes driving distance from the museum.
Wow.
It's got a world-class museum with material that's from all around the world. Some leading paleontologists have worked there. They've got many paleontologists on staff. They have visiting scientists coming all the time. It's just like a living, breathing museum. There's so much going on. And so as this 18-year-old from Doncaster in England, it was kind of just so mind-blowing that there was so much to kind of do. And you imagine, for pretty much, let's say that it's nearly 4 months of my time spent out there volunteering at this museum, it just opened my eyes completely to the world of paleontology and gave me that early kind of experience to think, what, this is what I need to do. And so I'd be there, I'd be working with other students. There'd be students there, there'd be interns, but I'd be at the weekend when they're off, I'd be straight in the museum, still doing stuff to try and just absorb as much info as I could, and try my best to, take part in digs and things. And that really was really laid the foundations for my career to come.
So you've gone from not being allowed to do A levels to going to Wyoming and going to this amazing, museum. So how did that enable you to actually become a paleontologist?
Yeah, so off the back of this trip to Wyoming, I managed to meet sort of a lot of people whilst out there, and people who kind of helped me, if you like, get my foot on the ladder a bit further. And after lots of discussions and chats to some of the students, some of the professionals who I met, and a lot of them said, Dean, paleontology is such an unusual field and very, very niche that it kind of comes down to, and this is no word of a lie, it's pretty much for kind of to be a professional paleontologist, the general public's perception of it comes down to something like 1 in every 70 or 1 in every 100 people, for that job. So wow. You've got so many people vying for that kind of big job as a paleontologist. It's so competitive, even though it is obviously a small field. It's so incredibly competitive. And so a lot of people I was speaking to were saying, Dean, what we would say for advice is continue to gain as much experience as you can. Look at one of the main things where they were saying is look at doing academic research, scientific papers and things. Now, with that, it's very interesting because I genuinely had never heard of a scientific paper. I had no concept whatsoever what that was. So when I heard students and stuff talking about papers, have you seen the latest paper here and there? I genuinely thought they meant newspapers. and I even said that to some of them, which they laughed about for the next month or so. but it was that just kind of helps to build obviously my character too, that I literally come from a background where there's no kind of academics in my family either. And so having this experience in Wyoming, I came back from Wyoming, came back to Doncaster, and I actually began then volunteering at my local museum, Doncaster Museum and Art Gallery. I basically had a meeting with an archaeologist there, so not a paleontologist, with the archaeologist, a guy called Peter Robinson, who actually had a real passion and interest in fossils. And he said, oh, Dean, based on your experience you've just got out in America, we'd be willing to have you as a volunteer here. I'd manage your volunteering, and it'd come in handy because it's such a vital part of the professional, future experience. Gaining the experience is really important going forward, and as a professional in the field. So I said, yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So all that sort of money I'd still continued at this point to be working these jobs I didn't like. I continued to just go to the museum in the day and volunteer as much as I could. And whilst doing that, I came across this collection. I should say that Doncaster Museum, they didn't know what they had in their collection. The last paleontologist, he died in, I think, let me get it right, 1912.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, so quite,
It's been a while.
Yeah, been a while. Yeah, so it's at that time. This is end of 2008. This was
Refossilized at that point.
yeah, exactly. So this is at a point where I was like, well, this is going to be important for me. So I just continued to go through this collection of stuff and came across over about, I think it was 10,000 fossils in the collection.
Wow.
And they had literally, the museum staff had no clue what they had, because most of it practically all of it had never been gone through by by a professional, definitely not for a long time. And the last geologist they had, she retired in 1983. So they didn't have anybody with that knowledge. So obviously I've just come from Wyoming, and this kid who's just full of passion for paleontology and just wanting to learn and absorb as much info. So I was kind of tasked with this going through all this material. And so looking at this stuff, it became clear to Peter that we had a possibility here to create a mini exhibition, which is what I ended up doing with the museum staff. Worked with Peter and actually based on some of the stuff I collected from my own personal collection over the years, we put together a mini exhibition on fossils, which actually did really well. We got a lot of interest from local press, and we had hundreds, if not probably thousands and thousands of people come to this little exhibition, and that gave me some really interesting experience. And that continued for probably the next couple of years, doing this volunteering. Obviously I didn't get paid a penny for this, and all the while obviously I'm still struggling financially, but I saw the bigger picture that this is important to gain this experience, because it's going to continue to put me continue to go up the ladder. And so continue to do that. And then it got to a point where it became clear that with this collection, it was really important. So working with Peter, we ended up applying for some funding and managed to get some funding so that we could pay people to work in the collection. And even though I wasn't guaranteed the job, of course, even though I'd helped to get the funding, luckily I did manage to get get part of the funding. I'd have been really annoyed if I didn't.
Yeah.
But I managed to get part of a contract job there. I think it ended up being for, was it a year, or maybe it's 14 months, I think it was. And so that kind of gave me my first sort of big position, if you like, working in paleontology. But all the while doing this wasn't until kind of, was this 2010, 11? During this time, because I'd gained this experience out in Wyoming and then gained this experience at Doncaster Museum, a major thing happened for me whilst at the museum in Doncaster. Was I was shown on one of the days going through this 10,000 fossils, I was shown a specimen that was thought to be a plaster copy of a thing called an ichthyosaur, which are these extinct marine reptiles. You'll have seen them in documentaries and stuff and that. They sort of look a bit like dolphins or sharks, but they're entirely unrelated. They're not swimming dinosaurs. They are a group of marine reptiles. And I was shown this one, thought to be a plastic copy. And bearing in mind, again, I'm 18 here. I said to there's two chaps, Peter and to Alan, the education chap who had the specimen in his care. I said, well, no, this isn't a plastic copy. It's real. And they just couldn't believe it. And they said, oh, well, we use this actively in education sessions at the museum. And I was like, oh, right, well, stop that. So we had it taken out the education department and had it cleaned up. And I was absolutely right. We had it confirmed by a couple of paleontologists. And that is really where my story kind of with academia began, because this is how it all kind of connects. And it's so bizarre how my career has gone, because going a little bit further back to Wyoming, serendipitously, I met somebody, a visiting professor from New York, who was out there literally for about 3 days. And her name is Professor Judy Massere. And I was invited to go on a dig with Judy and a small team from the Wyoming Dinosaur Center. And I jumped at the chance to go, of course. And I met Judy and I told them about that I was going to be volunteering at this museum. And anyway, I'd kept in touch with Judy. So when I came across this ichthyosaur at Doncaster, I spoke to her, and Judy was as it turns out, she's a world-renowned expert on ichthyosaurs. And she was approaching retirement age. So she'd spent a good 15, 20, 30 years being this kind of expert in the field. And so she said, oh, Dean, that's really rare. That's a really interesting specimen. It turns out the specimen had its last meal preserved inside its stomach.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so preserved between its ribs with this really large sort of black mass. And in there, we had a fish scale, and we had hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny microscopic hook-shaped objects, which were from the arms of squid. So we know that this ichthyosaur, about 183 million years ago, was feeding on squid and fish right before it died.
Incredible.
Yeah, amazing, right? And so that then this story, this discovery of this ichthyosaur is then what kind of put me down the route of academia, and that became my first peer-reviewed paper that I actually wrote. I began writing when I was 18, and that was published when I was 20 or 19. It was published in 2010.
I'm here with my mouth open. Your story is absolutely incredible, and I think one of the biggest things, particularly from Dan's point of view, he's always advocated that you don't need to go to university. If you've got a passion for something, you can work hard and you can get to it no matter what. And your story is just like it's so spot on. You know, you've achieved more by just fighting for what you want, and you've got there, and it's so amazing.
Oh, cheers for that. No, I appreciate it. And it was one of those things where I've had so many people over the years say to me, and this is one of the things where a lot of it I find it does come down to jealousy, but it's dropped off quite a bit in recent years, probably the last 5 years or so. But early on, when I started to write papers and I started to get a bit of a name for myself with one or two things, because now I'm at a point where I've written about 50 scientific papers, discovered new species to science. I've written various books and stuff like that. But early on in my career, people kind of looked down on me a little bit because I didn't do the traditional route of going to uni, getting an undergrad. And so with certain people, they were, looking down on me and saying, oh, no, you'll never be taken seriously in this field. You need an undergrad degree and these things. And I just thought, I don't want to do it. I want to do it my own way. I want to follow my passion and I want to gain the experience and go out and do that, because I'm very much one of those people who learn by doing. And so it took, where did it end up? Probably after the years and years of experience I started to gain, and I started to work in contract positions, and I started to get a good name for myself in paleontology, especially in the world of ichthyosaurs, which might sound like a small world, but in paleontology, it's quite a big world, actually. Ichthyosaurs have been known for about 200 years now, and in a scientific capacity. And it wasn't until January 2013, I got chatting to a couple of friends of mine, colleagues of mine, and they said, Dean, with all your experience now, why we should get you as an affiliation with an academic institution. You've published a lot. You're moving on from Doncaster. My contract stuff had finished at Doncaster, and so I became affiliated with the University of Manchester here in England. And right off the bat, we actually, based on the experience that I'd already had, so the sort of field experience, writing of papers. Even at this point, I'd written a book. I was writing my second book at this point. And they had some discussions about sort of doing a PhD right off the bat. And there was some early discussions about sort of being given an honorary PhD. And I was like, what? Oh, wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So I was like, that's crazy. But then I said to myself, if I was going to do this, I'd want to do it properly. And so the only way I could do that was I was given an opportunity that I'd obviously written. At this point, I'd written, I'd say, multiple papers, starting to make a name for myself in paleontology. And I was given the opportunity to do an MPhil. I don't know if you know what that is, but effectively it's a master's, but it's kind of like a higher master's. It's what we call a master's of philosophy, but it's in paleontology, and it's offered at various different universities across the UK. And so it's kind of like the in-between, not a straight up master's, it's kind of like a slightly more advanced master's. And often people then lead on from that to do that sometimes becomes their first year of the PhD. And so I ended up doing that, and that I completed in 2015. And it was kind of one of those things where I felt I didn't need to do it, but it was an opportunity. So I thought, you know what, let's do that. It might open some more doors. And after completing it, I ended up winning an award for the MPhil. It was like the best award in the department. And so I was like, oh, amazing, thank you. And then we had some discussions about, because again, not just for the MPhil, but for my other research at the time. And I'd actually just, at this point, this was where we think in 2015, I'd written many more papers. I discovered and named a new species at this point as well. And I just presented a TV show as well, which we can get into that stuff a little bit later. But after all of this, I got chatting about the PhD, because that came up again. And we said, Dean, based on all of your experience and that, we think you might be applicable at the University of Manchester to apply for the aptly named Dean Scholarship Award. And anyway, I did, and managed to get that. And so that was a 3-year fully funded PhD. And this is obviously incredibly rare for somebody who had never gone to university, didn't have even the GCSEs, the A-levels to get to uni, let alone have an undergrad, to then be able to do a PhD. And then past that, I got my PhD a couple of years ago now. And it was always one of those things where I've never felt I needed to have a PhD, never felt I needed to get the qualifications or get those letters behind my name. But it's one of those things where the opportunity was made available through my hard work, and it felt like it was the right decision to do. And I'm glad I did that, because it has opened up other different, new doors, other doors and things. And so it is great that I managed to do that. But I've done it if you like, my own way. I've not gone the sort of traditional route. And all the while, whilst doing getting to this point of being able to do a PhD, as I say, I've written in that time up until now, we have, 50 papers, named 5 new species of ichthyosaurs to science, including one I named after the one at Doncaster actually turns out to be a new species, let alone was it being used by children in the education department. It ended up being a new species that me and Judy Macere, who I met in Wyoming, we named Ichthyosaurus anningae, which is in honor of a fantastic paleontologist who's actually, it's her birthday today. It's her 222nd birthday.
Happy 226th birthday.
Yeah. And she was a great paleontologist from Lyme Regis in Dorset. Often it's said that the famous tongue twister, she sells seashells on the seashore. Yes. Yeah, a lot of people, you taught in school that it's inspired by Mary Anning. That's not true. It's not inspired by Mary, but it's something that I still like to bring up because it's a cool little thing that does remind me of her. But anyway, we named it after her as Ichthyosaurus anningae, and that was the first species I named. But then over the last few years, I've named a few more. And one of the cool things I named just a couple of years ago in 2019 was a little velociraptor-like dinosaur, which was found in Wyoming, which was goes back to being related to the Wyoming Dinosaur Center as it was in their care.
I mean, as Julie said, I'm a big advocate for not having to go to university necessarily, because you're such a great example of this. It's almost like we set this up, but you struggled at GCSE level in science, and now hundreds of kids struggle at GCSE level science, and it puts them off. I didn't get the grade because they examine you in a certain way in every single subject. It's done on your ability to memorize and transfer knowledge essentially into the exam.
Very true.
It has literally nothing to do with your passion and ability to then learn that subject and apply it to the world. Like, if you hadn't have done what you've done and gone off to Wyoming and really pursued your passion, that ichthyosaur wouldn't have been discovered. It just frustrates me that everyone is almost not forced, but told you have to go to university to pursue your passion in a higher field, in an academic field. And it's just not true. You're a prime example of that.
Oh, cheers for that, Dan. And I completely agree with that sentiment. I still remember right now, I can go back to sixth form, and some of the teachers there literally saying to us, you have this kind of sixth form group, and they're saying you have to go. Literally, they'll say you have to go to university. You need to do this. If not, you're going to waste your life. You're going to do this, going to do that. And there was so much pressure. I have friends or people I've lost sort of contact with over the years, but I know of people then, friends who went to uni simply because the teachers told them to, and then they either dropped out or they got a degree in something, but they're now doing a job which you didn't need a degree for, and yet now they're in debt by X amount of money. Yeah. And I know obviously there's the argument where you could say, well, okay, but you've got life experience, you've done this, and I understand that, but then ultimately that money and that time and that you could have been spent doing something else. And I'm not saying that I'm completely obviously against people going to uni and things like that. That's definitely not the case. But and in many cases, people do come to me and they say, oh, Dean, I'd love to do a career like what you've done. And I'll say, well, that's well and good, but you're not me, and and we're all different, and there's always different opportunities that arise, and it depends on I always say it comes down to the individual.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. We're all different. Some people are, yes, very academic, and that's the way they learn and they apply things, but we need to get away from this one singular route to everybody doing what they want to do. There are so many ways, like so many of our guests, Jules, you'll agree with this, have come on the show. And, we've had a historian who didn't do the traditional route. She just basically started talking about history and reached out to historians and built her knowledge that way. And there's so many examples in our catalogue of people that have not taken the traditional route, and they are absolutely thriving. And I love the fact that you're another one of those.
Yeah, cheers. And I appreciate it. I do think I completely agree with what you said about there is just so much pressure. There's so much pressure on students today, and I see it firsthand as well with family members, friends, but also I occasionally have students myself now with my affiliation at University of Manchester, where I work as an expert specialist and work with an undergrad student or a postgrad student, and I'll talk to them, get to know them really well. And they'll say there's so much pressure on them, not just now in the university life, but when they're in school, there's so much pressure from. You got to remember as well. I'm sure you'll both appreciate, but in schools, and it's something you don't really understand when you're 18. You're not really that fussed about these things, or maybe some people obviously are, but you don't understand that with schools, they have their own pressures that they need to be seen to be having, ticking boxes that so many students do go to university.
Yeah, and so that's part of the issues, isn't it?
Exactly.
So we should probably ask this question. What is paleontology?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, what do you actually do?
What do you actually do, Dean? Yeah, well, one thing I should say is that it often gets mixed up with archaeology. So archaeology, let's start by saying what it isn't. So archaeology is a field where it's all to do with sort of humans and sort of human prehistory, and often it gets mixed up. So a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, Dean, I'll say, oh, I work with dinosaurs, fossils, and things," and they'll say, "Oh, I'm an archaeologist." And I said, "No. Or you'll often get compared to Indiana Jones, right?" And
that's not a bad comparison.
Oh, definitely not. No, I'm happy with that. But with Indiana Jones, and so obviously he's like, he's a prime kind of public fronted idea of what an archaeologist is, and for some, for sure, I'm sure that is the case. But that's an archaeologist. Now, for a paleontologist, we literally, as part of my job, I literally look at the entire history of life on Earth and through studying fossils. So that goes way back to the age of the Earth, I should say, is 4.54 billion years old. So it's a really massive, unimaginable amount of time to really think about. And when we look at that, and we look at the oldest fossils on the planet, which are about 3.7 billion years old, and these are sort of microorganisms, algae and things like that. As animals change, obviously, through time and evolution, as they adapt to new environments, different animals evolve and things. And obviously, you have a very small percentage, to place in a context, 99.99999% of animals that ever lived on this planet are long gone and extinct. We'll never know. So what we have in the fossil record is but only a fraction of the animals and things that we have here, because fossilization is is an incredibly hard process. I've
never really thought about that. That there were creatures that we'll never know about because they weren't fossilized.
Yeah, exactly.
That's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like the Goldilocks effect, I guess. It has to be just right for preservation of animals to be preserved as fossils. And so, as a paleontologist, primarily kind of the straight up things of paleontologist. I should say it isn't Ross from Friends. I need to get that in because that's always something we paleontologists do get. But it's it's a fascinating area. We get to, I kind of mentioned at the beginning, I literally get the chance to go and dig up dinosaurs, and obviously lots of other different fossils, because dinosaurs only again make up a very small percentage of what paleontology is. But of course, that's what's in the public eye through the likes of Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, and obviously is very much in your face in museums. And why not? Dinosaurs are frigging cool.
Well, it's kind of changed recently, hasn't it? Like in the news, I've seen a lot of articles about our ideas of what dinosaurs look like is changing all the time.
Yeah, the whole feather thing.
The feather thing, the T-Rex's feathers. It kind of ruins Jurassic Park a bit, but.
I don't know. I think a T-Rex with feathers, that I could imagine like a chicken the size of a T-Rex. That'd be quite scary.
Chicken with teeth.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a good point that you say there, is that with the field of paleontology over the last 20-30 years has changed so radically. Like the ideas that you mentioned there about feathers and things, and even new discoveries in paleontology now have been made over the last 20 plus years of some fossils that are preserved with such great detail that we can work out exactly what colors they were based on the fact that they have color pigments preserved in their skin or their feathers.
How incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it? And so this field of paleontology, it's so much more than, I always laugh about it saying, I dig up dinosaurs, which is a big part of my work. But as a paleontologist, your job has changed so much now that we are out in the field digging up dinosaurs or the fossils, but that's such a small part of it now. There's lots of stuff, working in museums, so working as curators in museums, so that's taking care of the specimens, making sure members of the public can come and see them on display in museums, creating exhibitions. There's doing lots of academic research, working out what the sort of the latest and greatest finds are. Like I mentioned, the sort of bringing these animals to life, not Jurassic Park style, but bringing them to life in the sense of understanding their colors, what they actually were like in life, and how these animals behaved. There's also a big part of paleontology as well, of course, is communicating science. Science communicators. That's become a big part of my work as well. So it isn't. I always introduce myself obviously as a doctor of paleontology, paleontologist, but I'm very much obviously an author with the work that I do with books, but a big part of my work has become science, has become as a science communicator. So talking to, could be groups of school children up to, learned academics and of different field. You mentioned historians earlier, it might be historians or it could be anybody. And, and I mentioned this is a case where I'll go to, say, festivals and I'll talk about paleontology to big groups up to thousands of people, or I'll co-host TV shows and things. One of the big TV shows that I did going back a few years ago is a program called Dinosaur Britain. That was a primetime TV show for ITV1.
You know what? I think I watched that.
I did. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
good. I could hopefully enjoyed it.
Yes,
it
was
certainly.
great.
Oh,
yeah.
I said we all go through dinosaur phases.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. How do you get involved with writing papers? That's obviously something that obviously comes with an academic job, but how is it for you? Well, what do you get involved with there?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'd say going back like to Wyoming, where I'd never heard of writing papers and stuff, it was all completely new to me. And that was genuinely the way I was kind of thrown in the deep end with it. I was told, Dean, the best way of doing it is just read papers. And I read these papers, and between us, I literally had no idea. I read the paper and was like, the hell did I just read? It was,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's so technical, right? And I was like, what is this? I'm never going to be able to write a paper. And so I, after finding that ichthyosaur in Doncaster and having the encouragement from Judy Massere, who I met out in Wyoming, she encouraged me to write this paper. And I've still got the first drafts of that paper, and they are hideous. So poorly written. But it was my starting point. It's my foot on the ladder in academia. And so I genuinely, the way in which I did it, I just started writing. I started reading. I got hold as much literature as I could. Some stuff I paid for. Other stuff I literally, hounded paleontologists, send them emails saying, hi, I'd like to read your paper, blah, blah, and killed them with kindness. And then they sent me a copy, and I just read and read and read. And then I started to kind of pick up the lingo on stuff and some of the technical literature and began writing. And then sort of before I knew it, can I say my first paper was published 2010. A year later, I'd published, I think, a couple more papers, and then it started to build up and up and up. And as I mentioned, it's about 50 papers now with more in the works. And it just got to a point where I just began then collaborating with other people, researchers from around the world, who other people would then come to me. So if I published a couple of papers on ichthyosaurs, someone might have seen that paper and said, oh, Dean's the ichthyosaur person, right? We need to speak to him. And so they'd say, oh, Dean, we've got an ichthyosaur at X museum. Could you come and take a look? And I'd be like, you know what? Sure, let me go take a look. Turns out it's really cool. Nobody studied it. It needs to be described in the literature. I'd do that. I just physically go and do it. And bear in mind, I didn't get paid for any of this. I've literally never been paid to write a scientific paper, bar from my my PhD research. That's it. And I say paid. It's not, you're not really paid to write the papers, of course. It's just funding to make sure you can just about survive. but no, it's often with academia for me has been a real labor of love. And through doing all this research and getting into academia, writing papers, I've become, it's always a feel embarrassed saying it, but people always point it out for me, is that I've become literally an internationally recognized expert in the field of not only paleontology, but specifically as one of the world's leading experts on ichthyosaurs.
I love that. That's so cool.
That's a cool statement.
That's so cool.
It's a party starter.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's mad though, when you think of it. And let's say I go back and I think to myself, the mindset I was in 2008 and a few years after that, I genuinely didn't have, more than a couple of quid to my name. My mum and my sister at one point, this is probably 2010 maybe, sat me down. I still remember like it was yesterday, and said, Dean, are you going to be okay in this field? You're working jobs you don't like, you're volunteering, not earning any money from paleontology yet. What are you going to do? And I said, I'll be okay. I know what I want to do. I've got this drive. I've got this passion. I need to pursue it. If not, I'm just going to become disillusioned with life generally. Yeah. And I don't want to work a job that I don't like. So for me, it was kind of all or nothing for paleontology. And I just wanted to make sure I could make it in any way, shape or form, but also I should say to help as many people along the way as well.
So let's talk a little about your recent book that's come out. You mentioned you've done a bit of TV and you're doing a lot of science communication. This forms part of that, right?
Yeah, definitely. So this book is called Locked in Time. It's called Locked in Time: Animal Behavior Unearthed in 50 Extraordinary Fossils. And the kind of brief background to this, it's really funny in many ways. And I say that it's all connected my journey and stuff and how things pan out. That going back to the Wyoming Dinosaur Center, on my very first day, I was showed around the museum by another volunteer, a guy called Jordi from Spain. And Jordi had showed me around the museum, and he made me stop at one of the exhibits. And he said to me, Dean, look at this cool fossil. And now he showed me, and it was like a large block of limestone. So this yellowish limestone. And I didn't really see much apart from what looked like sort of footprints or trampling in the surface. And I was kind of puzzled by this. And so I said, I'm not sure it is, Jordi. And he said, well, just stay focused on that and follow it. So these kind of footprints, they kind of led all the way along this limestone block. And I followed it. And 9.7 meters later, there was a tiny Jurassic 150 million year old horseshoe crab preserved dead in its tracks.
Wow.
And yeah, I was blown away by this fossil. It comes from a site near a place, quite a famous place in geology, paleontology, called Solnhofen. And you may have heard of the sort of bird-like dinosaur called Archaeopteryx, one that was found with feathers, and that comes from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of these sort of so-called transitional forms between birds and dinosaurs. And anyway, this horseshoe crab fossil comes from there, and I was blown away by it. It basically, what it captured is behavior from 150 million years ago. So you had there this entire life process of this little horseshoe crab that had left its final steps in time, and then it was preserved forever for somebody to come along, collect it, for that then to be studied. And it told so much about prehistoric life that I was genuinely so captivated by it that it genuinely gave me the idea then. This is right, obviously, at the beginning of my professional career. I say professional loosely at this point, so I was 18. It just gave me an idea to think about fossils in an entirely different way. I'd never seen anything like it. And so this idea, this book, Locked in Time, has been built over the course of more than a decade of going through the literature, seeing extraordinary fossils that have direct evidence of behavior. So a couple of other examples in the book, we have genuinely dinosaurs that have been found fighting to their death.
Wow.
And that's on the cover as well. The cover artwork is of this dinosaur, but it also photographs and illustrations of this dinosaur feature inside. And this is of two dinosaurs. One you'll both know, Velociraptor, that was found with a Triceratops relative called Protoceratops, literally found together fighting to their death. And they died they died presumably after quite a lengthy fight, because and as they are preserved, I should say that the Protoceratops literally has the Velociraptor's arm and its beak, and the big infamous killing claw on the Velociraptor's foot is held right high up in the air, and it's in the position of the neck of the Protoceratops. Wow. So it's very likely that they died in that. Well, they definitely died in that position, but based on the geology of the site, it shows that it was probably some sort of landslide, or probably triggered by potentially thunderstorms, therefore triggering heavy rainfall in a sand dune area. Then covered this extraordinary this battle, and then it led to an extraordinary fossil. So it has this book. Effectively, it's unique. We recently had a review came in from Goodreads, which genuinely says, in a book, in a world full of books about dinosaurs, this one is truly unique. And it gave me goosebumps reading it the first time, because it's a book unlike any other dinosaur book. It literally allows us to see these animals as living, breathing animals that are as real as you and I. You look at it gives us an unprecedented glimpse at the behaviors of these things. So from the sex lives of animals. So there's other animals that are preserved literally whilst mating, preserved as fossils. Imagine that.
What a way to go.
Yeah, exactly. What a way to go out with a bang. So, for these fossils, it's so extraordinary. Obviously, I say that the fossil record itself, to anything to become a fossil, is so exceptionally rare. So to have an animal or series of animals preserved actually doing something or showing some form of behavior, whether it is mating, whether it's an animal that's pregnant, or whether it's an animal with its last meal preserved, or one dinosaur I feature in there is a T-Rex that was infected by parasites. So there's so much you can learn from the fossil record, and that's where it's all culminated and brought together in this book.
What's it like being on a dig? Because I mean, it's the fossil you explained earlier of having the footprints in there. to see that and then go, oh my God, like you find a part of it and then you trace it back and then you've got like 9 meters worth of fossil. Like, how do you even begin to find that and deal with that?
Yeah, it's such a, the way I point it, it's such an incredible experience. Now, every time as well, every time, no matter how many digs I go on, how many fossil trips or hunts, whatever I go on, when you find a fossil for the first time, you are the very first person anywhere in the world to feel that, to pick that up, to see that. And millions of years, that individual is preserved over millions and millions of years to eventually to be found by you or your team. It's such an incredible experience. And when it comes to fossils, the way in which, say, paleontologists go out and find these things, because a lot of stuff, I must say, especially not so much now, but in the past, many fossils were just found by chance, of course. You imagine here in the UK, you had the Industrial Revolution. So there was lots of mining, lots of sort of factories being built left, right, and center. There was railways being put in, all these things. And during all these constructions of these things, there were fossils being found. So often, it was quite by chance. But nowadays, paleontologists, geologists have plenty of information, often in the academic, the technical literature available to them, to be like, look, these are the types of rocks you need to be looking at, primarily like sedimentary rocks. So I mentioned like limestones, mudstones, and things. Here's where we know these rocks out, crop out, and here's a chance you're going to find fossils. Well, if we go to, let's say, for example, again in the UK, if we went to the Yorkshire coast, and we went looking for fossils and we found a fossil of a squid-like animal, well, we know that squid-like animal would have been living in the sea. Therefore, where that fossil's been found, the environment clearly indicates an extinct, an ancient marine environment, so an ancient sea. Whereas you might go somewhere else along the Yorkshire coast and you might find dinosaur footprints, for example. And if you look at the geology in the cliffs there, you'd be able to work out that always in rocks that have kind of not disturbed at all by how the plates and things change and how the geology changes and over time. If you imagine like a cliff face where at the bottom of the cliff, that's always going to be the oldest rocks. Those at the top are going to be the youngest. So if you find, say, a fossil on the beach, there is a way that you literally can work out pretty much where it came from in the cliffs. And therefore, those fossils from the bottom of the cliff, the base of the cliff, are older than those at the top. So you might find along the same location, you could find dinosaur footprints. Those footprints clearly weren't made out in the sea, otherwise they wouldn't have preserved. So they indicate that they were preserved in a coastal sort of setting on the coast, like basically a dinosaur leaving its footprints in mud or in sand that then preserved and became fossilized. And then that tells you more about that environment. So that indicates that you obviously you're not in the sea, you're at an environment on the coast. It might have been that was it sticky mud? Was it was it a case as was this animal on its own? Was it traveling in a group? All these types of things. But when when you are on a dig and sort of like a big dig, say again, I'll go back to like Wyoming. So I do a lot of work still with the Wyoming Dinosaur Center and elsewhere, but most of my work in America is still with the Dinosaur Center. It's one of those things where it's very mind blowing, and it's also, the way I explain it's very surreal as well. You see these things in documentaries, you'll read about dinosaurs and stuff and digs and things as kids, or you might read in books today as adults. And also, you see obviously, you see like in Jurassic Park, of course, the beginning of the Jurassic Park, they're digging out in Montana. It's definitely not like that. They made it look way too easy. They're just brushing the dirt off the bones. It's definitely not like that. Sometimes you're digging through you're digging through rocks that are incredibly hard. That you'll break tools on them. It's that hard to actually extract the bones. And I've been part of digs where it's taken months and months and months and months just to get out partial skeletons, whereas some digs that I'm aware of have continued for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years and longer.
Word.
Yeah, because some of these things you can't just sort of just take it out the ground. If we came across an animal, a dinosaur in the ground, if we took it straight out the ground, or if we took bits of it out without kind of assessing how it's preserved, without fully exposing it, what it would mean is that we ultimately lose the science there. We all that information about when that animal died. So let's say its head became disattached and disassociated from the neck. Let's say the arm bones became disarticulated, so a few bones disappeared. The tail became separated all these bits and pieces. That's a process, I think, what we call taphonomy. And taphonomy is really important because it tells us what happened to this animal after it died, what affected it, and so therefore how it's preserved. So there's so much when you go to a dinosaur dig or a fossil dig or even just a general fossil hunt. There's so much to kind of always think about in the back of your mind. And this is why I kind of bring it back, going back to what I was saying a moment ago about when you find a fossil for the first time. It's such an important thing to experience, and anybody can experience that, from a young child to somebody retired or a professor or something. And that's what's really nice and unique about paleontology, that it is a field, it is, if you like, a club where everybody can contribute. There's children around the world who genuinely have actually found new species to science just by being inquisitive and picking up a rock, or as it turns out, it was a fossil.
That's so cool. And anyone listening to this thinking, I'd love to be a paleontologist, what is the one piece of advice you'd give to someone thinking, I want to pursue this?
Oh, that's a really good question. That I would have to say is I just have to say you've got to gain experience. That's the most important thing. Experience, and probably, if you allow me to say so, experience, but make sure what you're doing, you enjoy it. Yeah. So, even with paleontology, I'll admittedly say, and any paleontologists who do listen to this, well, I'm sure they'll agree, there are large parts of paleontology that are, it's very laborious. There are large parts where it's, number crunching stuff, lots of emails and stuff, day-to-day things like that. It's not all just, fun and games outside, digging dinosaurs all day long and things, and studying their bones. It's, you need to, when you go into paleontology, or if you're looking at a career in paleontology, you have to look at the bigger picture and ultimately work out what paleontology can sort of do for you and what you can do for the science as well. A lot of people do come to me and say, oh, Dean, I want to work on dinosaurs because dinosaurs are cool. And I'll say, well, that's all well and good, but there's 20,000 or whatever people already, probably not that many, but there's thousands and thousands of people already working on dinosaurs. How about you try and find something else that you can get excited about that people aren't working on? Therefore, there's more chance of you actually being able to make a professional career.
And if people did want to gain experience, how can they go about doing it? What would you suggest?
It kind of depends on their age, for one thing. So if say they are younger, so let's say it was children or teenagers and things, 110%, and I'd say the same for adults actually as well for this, 110%, the main thing you want to be doing is getting out in the field, responsibly collecting fossils. Have a fossil collection, because it gives you that experience of how to handle fossils, how to care for them, and to also appreciate what they are. And with that in mind as well, definitely be visiting museums, go into as many many events and things that you can to meet with professionals as well, ask advice. As for somebody who's a bit older, for students or people at least from the sort of age of 18 plus, 100% get volunteering at places where you can. If you live locally to, say, a museum that has a fossil collection or has a geology collection, get into museums to just see if you can volunteer. And I know, of course, I should say that, because I do work a lot in museums, often museums unfortunately don't have the finances to help have, to actually have time to train volunteers. And so I know some people listening would say, oh, well, my museums have turned me down or stuff like that. That's another thing where, again, I'd have to say, going back to about following your passion and everybody being different, I'm not saying don't take no for an answer, but if that is the case and you're in somewhere where you don't have a chance to do gain first-hand experience, then make sure you go out somewhere to do that. If you have an opportunity to say, I don't know, say you lived on, I don't know, let's just say in northern Scotland, and you thought to yourself, you know what, there's nowhere around me, it's middle of nowhere, I really want to be a paleontologist. Make a point of finding somewhere that is remotely close to you. For example, in northern Scotland, the Isle of Skye is actually fantastic for fossils and for dinosaurs in particular. And so, you could travel, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to gain experience, Monday to Friday or every day or whatever. It could just be a little bit a little bit goes a long way. Anything like that adds to your CV, and it helps make you more of a sort of full-rounded individual, and it gives you a proper insight into what it's going to be like to potentially be a paleontologist.
Awesome. What is something that's maybe something not in the job description, something you just never expected to have to deal with going into this industry?
Oh, that's good. I I touched upon it obviously briefly before. I'd have to say the TV side of things. Never in a million years, no pun intended, but never in a
Very good.
million years, never in a million years did I anticipate that I'd be, co-presenting a primetime TV series watched by millions of people. It's mad. And obviously since that and before that, I've done quite a lot of other TV things, and that is something where I never thought I'd do that. And it was something which, even today, if I'm brutally honest, I still feel sometimes uncomfortable with, and I can get quite nervous about it and anxious because I'm not a trained professional in the TV world. And so, I am at heart, I am a professional paleontologist, I'm a scientist. And so when you're doing TV stuff, you've got to remember that you're speaking to a very, very different audience. And that's where you have to, not to use the old sort of mundane expression of think outside the box, but you very much have to do that because it's important to look at the bigger picture again here. And this is why I say, if you can gain any sort of experience before you kind of go into paleontology, professional, whatever, again, kind of science communication is important. So if you are somebody listening to this and you genuinely like dinosaurs and fossils and you want to be a paleontologist, and there isn't a somewhere near you where you can go and go and volunteer and get experience, you could easily find local groups. It could be, I don't know, it could be something as random as a knitting group, and you could actually speak to them about dinosaurs, gain that experience. It sounds random, it sounds a bit silly, but it's true. It gives you that experience to speak in front of people, and that all really does come in very, very handy. And as I say, that would come down for me, the stuff to do with TV especially. It was, I've worked with some really interesting people. I've had the privilege to do some stuff with Attenborough. I've met yeah, amazing. And these are things which I say I'd never would I anticipate I'd even been in a position to do this. And it's been also so other random things, working with the likes of going on programs like Sunday Brunch here again in the UK on Channel 4. That was great. Meeting people on there and chatting away to some of the celebrities. It was like we had like Ashley Banjo from Diversity, having a good chat to him. And as it turns out, he did a bachelor's in I think it was in natural history or something. He loves dinosaurs. So we hit it off and was chatting about dinosaurs. So it's just such a and as I say, going back again, I'm probably rambling on a bit too much here, but with that, it's one of those areas which I never really thought I would do anything in, but it's opened up many other doors as well.
So cool.
Yeah. And would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Absolutely not.
No,
yeah, no, I'm joking. Of course, no, I really would, and I think, if anything, if I know what I know now, and if I knew that back 13 years ago, I'd be probably supercharged even more, and I'd just think to myself, wow, what a fascinating world there is to explore, for paleontology. And a lot of people often get bogged down, I should say, with, I've talked about documentaries and things. People will watch that and they'll say, I want to be a paleontologist, and, I love dinosaurs, all this sorts of stuff. But when you look at paleontology as the whole, and this is why I talk about just kind of thinking outside the box, you've got to try and look at the bigger picture of dinosaurs, for example, of such a tiny fraction of what paleontology is. And there's always going to be more opportunities to make it in this field by looking at other stuff that people aren't. That's what's important as well, I should say.
Well, Dean, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. I love your story. I love the drive and passion you had, and the route you took to get where you are. It's really inspirational. And thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. Where can people find you on social media and reach out if they need to?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media, primarily on Instagram, Twitter, and I've got a public Facebook page as well. So that's just at Dinar Lomax. But I also have my website as well, if you want to learn a bit more about my background, some of the research that I do, my books and things, and that's just simply dinarlomax.co.uk.
And where can people pick up your new book, Dean?
Well, you can buy that. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it from Waterstones. You can get it from, apparently it should be in bookshops now as well. But I definitely recommend, if you are interested in getting a hold of Locked in Time, I get it direct from the publisher, which is Columbia University Press.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Dean.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.